Shalom, family and friends. In this lesson, we're going to talk about some of the writings of Shaul or Paul. In Galatians chapter 2, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith of Yahushua HaMashiach. Even we have believed in Yahushua HaMashiach, that we might be justified by the faith of Mashiach, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. What did Shaul mean by this term, works of the law? It is commonly taught in Christian theology that the works of the law mean the works of the Torah, or obedience to the commandments of Yahuwah. And this is often contrasted with faith in Yahusha, or faith in the Messiah. But let's look more closely into this issue and see what Shaul was actually talking about. Bet, or 2 Peter chapter 3. An account that the long suffering of our Master is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, has written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of things in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable rest, as they do also the other scriptures, unto their own destruction. You therefore, beloved, seeing you know these things before, beware lest you also, being led away with the error of the wicked, fall from your own steadfastness. So we see here in Kepha's letter, he speaks about the writings of Shaul. He talks about the error of the wicked. The word wicked is translated from the Greek theismos, which means one who breaks through the restraint of law or the Torah and gratifies his lusts. Lawless, that is criminal. So this term wicked means lawless, or a Torah breaker. So in other words, these people that are twisting the words of Shaul are Torah breakers. They don't want to obey the commandments of Yahuwah. Even while Shaul was still alive, there were people that were twisting his writings, twisting his letters, twisting his words, to teach people not to obey the Torah. So this is a problem. Now we're 2,000 years after the fact. How much more during those 2,000 years have the words of Shaul been twisted? So when we look at the writings of Shaul, we have to understand the vocabulary that Shaul is using. We have the Torah, which he calls the law of faith, or sometimes he just shortens it to faith. He calls it the law of righteousness, or just righteousness. The law and the prophets, or scripture. In contrast to that, we have the doctrines of the Essenes, which Shaul calls works of the law, or deeds of the law. So when we read his letters, we have to understand the context of his letters, the context of what he's writing about. And we have to understand the environment of his day. What teachings, what were the beliefs of the people? What was he reacting to? Shaul deals with the teachings of the Pharisees. He deals with the teachings of the Sadducees. He deals with the teachings of the Essenes. He deals with the teachings of the various peoples where they have the Israelites have been scattered among the Gentiles. If we do not understand the environment of the first century, it will be easy for us to twist the words of Shaul. Three times we get this phrase, works of the law, in Galatians chapter 2. What are the works of the law? As a matter of debate between Catholicism and Protestantism, this was at issue in the Reformation. The Protestant position, or at least that of Martin Luther, was that Paul's phrase, works of the law, refers to good works. To him, any human effort to obey Alaim is works of the law. Helping old ladies across the street, caring for sick children are works of the law. The Catholic position, as summarized by Thomas Aquinas on his commentaries on Romans and Galatians in his Summa, works of the law means obedience to the Old Covenant, particularly its rituals. So we see that in Christian theology, they take the words of Shaul and add their own interpretation without going into and understanding what Shaul was writing. So to a Christian, the works of the law means doing good things, whether by human effort or it means obeying the Torah. And this is simply not the case. In 1947, about 400 years after the Reformation, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls is found a document called 4Q MMT. 4Q means the fourth cave of Qumran. MMT is an acronym for Miksat Maaseh HaTorah, which means on the works of the law. Sometimes this Hebrew phrase Miksat Maaseh HaTorah is translated precepts of the works of the law. So now we're going to find out what Shaul was actually writing about in his letters when he referred to the works of the law. And we have to understand that these Christian doctrines about the term works of the law were baseless. They were just making up meaning for something that they did not understand. This document is a letter from the Essenes to the Pharisees about ritual purity. Apparently, it was written by the leader or the leaders of this Qumran community to the Pharisees of Jerusalem. In 4QMMT, it's the only use of the phrase works of the law in ancient literature outside of Paul. Just in Paul and in 4QMMT. What does it mean when they use the term works of the law? So here we find out that works of the law is actually a term from Essene doctrine. And this letter was written by the Essenes to the Pharisees. Remember that Shaul or Paul was a Pharisee. So apparently, when Shaul writes about the works of the law in his letters, he is responding to this letter written by the Essenes to the Pharisees. Here's the end of 4QMMT, the end of the letter and where they use this phrase. Now we have written to you some of the works of the law, those which we determined would be beneficial for you and your people, because we have seen that you possess insight and knowledge of the law. Understand all these things and beseech him to set your counsel straight, and so keep you away from evil thoughts and the counsel of Belial. So here in this letter, written by the Essenes to the Pharisees, this letter trying to convince the Pharisees to follow the doctrines of the Essenes. Then you shall rejoice at the end time when you find the essence of our words to be true. Again, this is the Essenes writing in their letter to the Pharisees. And it will be reckoned to you as righteousness in that you have done what is right and good before him, to your own benefit and to that of Yashraal. This letter is about the works of the law, and it's about being reckoned as righteous before Elohim, sometimes translated being justified before Elohim. Do you recognize that phrase? Also from Paul, isn't it? Again, the only place outside of Paul that we get this kind of phrase. So when we read the letters of Shaul or Paul, we have to understand that many times he's reacting to things that are going on in the world at his time. So here are some points in the letter of the Essenes of works of the law in 4QMMT. Purity of liquids poured from one container to another. Issues about the impurity about bones and animal hides. Whether or not dogs can be in Jerusalem. Skin diseases. Keeping away from Gentiles, those scattered among the Gentiles. In other words, the house of Yeshua that were scattered among the Gentiles. Because in the Essene community, they did have proselytes, which are non-Israelite converts. Keeping the blind and deaf out of the temple. So these are some points that are mentioned in this letter written by the Essenes. And we see that the Essenes were a very extreme sect of Judaism. So these were their teachings, and we see that these teachings go far beyond the commandments that Yahuwah gave to the Israelites. Romans chapter 3. But now the righteousness of Elohim without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets, even the righteousness of Elohim, which is by faith of Yahushua HaMashiach unto all, and upon all them that believe. For there is no difference. For all have sinned and come short of the esteem of Elohim. So when Shaul is writing about the righteousness of Elohim, what does that mean to an Israelite? What does that mean to a Hebrew? Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 6. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before Yahuwah our Elohim, as he has commanded us. So we see here if a person does not understand what Shaul is talking about, we can see how it would be easy for someone to wrest his words. So Shaul is contrasting law with Torah and the prophets, law and the prophets. And the righteousness of Elohim, which is found in obeying the commandments of Yahuwah, is the faith of Yahusha HaMashiach. Because what did Yahusha do? He obeyed all the commandments of Yahuwah. In him was no sin. The definition of sin is to break the Torah. Being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Mashiach Yahusha, whom Elohim has set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, to declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past through the forbearance of Elohim. To declare, I say, at this time his righteousness, that he might be just, and the justifier of him which believes in Yahusha. Who believes in Yahusha? Is it just to believe that the Messiah existed? Or is it to obey the commandments of Yahusha, to believe his words? Yahusha said that he did not come to destroy the law or the prophets. He came to do or to fulfill. He said that none of the words of the Torah will be removed. Matthew chapter 26. For this is my blood of the New Testament or New Covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. Remission means freedom from sin, freedom from, release from prison to sin. Again, sin is breaking the commandments of Yahuwah. His blood was for the remission of sin. It means that his blood was to free us from bondage to sin, or free us from the bondage of Torah breaking. Where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Of works? No, but by the law of faith. So here we see that Paul is talking about two different laws, two different doctrines, two different theologies. There's the law of works, and then there's the law of faith. The law of works, that's the law of, or the doctrine of the Essenes. The law of faith is the Torah, the commandments of Yahuwah. Therefore, we conclude that a man is justified by faith without deeds of the law. So how is a man justified? By faith. What is faith? Faith in Yahuwah. How can you have faith in Yahuwah and not obey his commandments? Without deeds of the law, without the doctrines taught by the Essenes. Matthew chapter 23. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the Torah, judgment and mercy and faith. These ought you to have done, and not to leave the other undone. So we see that Yahusha criticized the Pharisees for picking and choosing what they wanted to do out of the Torah. But we see that the Torah is a matter of faith. Is he the Alim of the Yahudim, or Judeans only? Is he not also of the Gentiles? Yes, of the Gentiles also. Seeing it is one Elohim, which shall justify the circumcision by faith, and the uncircumcision through faith. Do we then make void the Torah through faith? Alim forbid. Yes, we establish the Torah. So what does Shaul make plain in his letter? Is he saying that the Torah is done away with? Is he saying that we no longer need to obey the commandments given to Moshe through Yahuwah? This is not what Shaul taught. In fact, he taught the establishment of the Torah. What he taught against was the teachings of man. He taught against the traditions. He taught against vain doctrines. What shall we say then? That the Gentiles which followed not after righteousness have attained to righteousness, even the righteousness which is of faith? But Yasharal, which followed after the law of righteousness, has not attained the law of righteousness. So we see that Yasharal, which followed after the Torah of righteousness, did not attain the Torah of righteousness. Why did they not attain the Torah of righteousness? Because they started following after the traditions of men. Devarim chapter 6. And Yahuwah commanded us to do these statutes, to fear Yahuwah our Alim for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness, if we observe to do all these commandments before Yahuwah our Alim, as he has commanded us. This is why Yahusha constantly berated the Pharisees and their teachings, because they were nullifying the Torah through their doctrines. But Yashral, which followed after the Torah of righteousness, has not attained to the Torah of righteousness. Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 51. Hearken to me, you that follow after righteousness, you that seek Yahuwah. Look unto the rock whence you are hewn, unto the hole of the pit whence you are digged. Look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bare you. For I called him alone, and blessed him, and increased him. So we are called to follow after the Torah of righteousness. But Yisrael did not attain it because they diverted to the way and traditions of men. Wherefore? Because they sought it not by faith, but as it were by the works of the law. For they stumbled at that stumbling stone. As it is written, Behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and a rock of offense, and whosoever believe on him shall not be ashamed. So we see here, this is why Yeshua did not attain the Torah of righteousness, because they did not seek it by faith. They did not seek it according to the instruction of Yahuwah, but according to the works of the law, according to the traditions and doctrines invented by human beings. Yeshayahu or Isaiah chapter 8. And he shall be for a sanctuary, but for a stone of stumbling and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Yasharal, for a gin and for a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And many among them shall stumble and fall and be broken and be snared and be taken. Bind up the testimony, seal the Torah among my disciples. So we understand that the stumbling stone, the rock of offense, to be Yahusha, HaMashiach, because he offended the people by going against their traditions. But Yahusha sealed the Torah among the people that followed him. Those that follow him obey the Torah. For Moshe describes the righteousness which is of the Torah, that the man which does those things shall live by them. And that's from Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 18. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am Yahuwah. So if a man obeys the commandments of Yahuwah, he will live. But also the righteousness which is of faith speaks on this wise, say not in your heart, who shall ascend into heaven, that is to bring Mashiach down from above? Or who shall descend into the deep, that is to bring Mashiach again from the dead? But what says it? The word is nigh you, even in your mouth and in your heart, that is, the word of faith which we preach. So, of course, Shaul is quoting Devarim or Deuteronomy chapter 30. For this commandment which I command you this day, it is not hidden from you, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven, that you should say, who shall go up for us to heaven and bring it unto us, that we may hear it and do it. Neither is it beyond the sea, that you should say, who shall go over the sea for us and bring it unto us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very nigh unto you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. So again, Shaul is not nullifying the Torah. He's not saying that the law is done away with. He's not saying that we just believe, we just have faith in some magical formula, and then we don't have to obey the commandments of Yahuwah anymore. He's quoting everything from the Torah. So how can he be negating the Torah? That if you confess with your mouth, Rabbi Yahusha, and shall believe in your heart that Elohim has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. For with the heart man believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. For the scripture says, whosoever believes on him shall not be ashamed. So again, for with the heart man believes unto righteousness. What is righteousness? To obey the Torah of Yahuwah. And again, he's quoting from scripture. What is scripture? The Torah and the prophets. Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 28. Therefore thus says Adonai Yahuwah, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. He that believes shall not make haste. That's what is usually translated in KJV. But when we look at the Septuagint, it says, and he that believes on him shall by no means be ashamed. And this is what Shaul is quoting from the prophet Yeshayahu. So Yahusha HaMashiach is the foundation. He is the cornerstone. And in the cornerstone of a building, that cornerstone sets the direction and line of every other stone that is placed in that building. So Yahusha is the example. If we believe in him, we ought to live as he lived. So Yahusha was without sin. He was without breaking the commandments of Yahuwah. So if we follow his example, we ought to live lives that are faithful to the Torah of Yahuwah. Fear Elohim and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Bind up the testimony, seal the Torah among my disciples. Shalom, family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Like, comment, and share.